Good evening and thank you for joining us. This is our daily conversation that we have every evening at 8 p.m. discussing the matters that are of most importance in the country today. Before we get to the conversation for this evening, I just want to remind you at 9 p.m. this evening, we will be releasing a conversation that I have just done with Ambassador Rituparna, the former Foreign Secretary of India. We've talked about China and Pakistan and the possibilities of how the aggression on the border is likely to play out. It's a very important conversation, and that's going to be up at 9 o'clock. So please do remember to take a look at it. But coming to the conversation that we're having right now. Now, we've had, at this small organization that I've started with 4 people, we've received hundreds of CVs of people who are out of jobs, who are looking for employment, who are looking for a way to get involved, who are looking for a way to get back in. What's worse is that we receive hundreds of requests from graduates looking for unpaid internships because there's absolutely no room for them to actually look for paid jobs. So now they want unpaid internships. And even the competition in that area is now scathing and really difficult. And if we look up from our tables and we look at the entire country, the picture is extremely grim. Hospitality, aviation, media, the IT sector is a bloodbath, to say the least, of the number of people who are losing jobs. There is a silver lining. The CMIE data tells us that the unemployment numbers have improved from about 24% to 10%. Which means that 1 in every 5 people who used to be unemployed in India last month, it's now 1 in every 10 people. So that's a really good number. But our understanding from looking at those numbers is that a large amount of that improvement is from rural India because of the Manrega efforts of giving people employment in rural India. So it's a good thing that rural India is actually picking up faster than urban India. But urban India is where all of these sector jobs are, the ones that I just mentioned. So here's what we're going to do today. We've put together a panel. We're going to talk about sectors. Which sectors are badly affected? The second question we're going to attempt to answer, I said attempt to answer, is what do you do if you have been laid off? How do you repurpose your skills, your CV, your resume, your profile in order to make yourself relevant and attractive in a post-COVID world? Now, I know these are very harsh things to say, but this is the reality of where we are right now. The truth is, in any sector, you've either received a pay cut, or you've received a pink slip, or you're worried about receiving one of these two things. There are very few people in the country right now who can safely say they don't expect either of these things to happen to them. So we need to be prepared. And I also want to ask my audience, and I'll ask you again a little later in the show, to tell me if you want a personal finance conversation on how to organize your finances for pay cuts and for job losses, and we'll arrange one with experts if that's something you're interested in. For today, we're talking about how to make ourselves relevant in the job market post-COVID. Let me introduce my panel. My panel is always really cool, remember? So we have Professor Santosh Mehrotra, who teaches economics at JNU. And the reason why he's part of this conversation is because he understands employment, skill development, economics of education and labor better than anyone else I have spoken with. He teaches at the Center for Informal Sector and Labor Studies at JNU. We also have Rituparna Chakraborty. She's a co-founder and senior vice president at TeamLease. Now, TeamLease provides staffing and human resource services. So basically, they're into payroll process outsourcing and they're into recruitment. So they get an idea of what's going on, specifically with the IT sector, where we've received a lot of questions. Manisha Pande joins me, executive editor at Newslaundry. Always a pleasure to have Manisha on the show. She's also been looking at the media. Now, we've had job cuts in the media that are, that make your heart bleed, because journalists without jobs is a very, very bad thing for the country, let alone for just the journalists. We're going to talk about that as well. Also, we're going to take your questions as you send them in. We have Aditya Narayan Mishra, Director, CEO of CIEL HR Services, who's also currently into recruitment and staffing. So he understands, again, various sectors very well. So pop in your questions in the chat section. Or let me also point out, like I do at the beginning of all the debates, 3 women on this panel. I'm counting myself, I know. I think that's pretty good representation. So we're getting there slowly. And I'm happy to note that as well. All right, let's get straight to it. Professor Mehrotra, good evening. Would you take us through the latest numbers? Is it rural India that's improving? What is urban India looking like? What kind of job losses have you registered in your recent research report that's come up?
You've understood the broad situation correctly, but you have to understand that as far as the rural improvement in the situation and even the urban improvement in the situation is for very specific reasons. You mentioned Manrega. So yes, a lot of people have gotten involved in Manrega. It's not a job, first of all. Manrega has, in the history of Manrega in India, never provided more than 50 days of person days of work per household. And even if it rises to 100, which is where the maximum, that's not a job. Point one. Point two, rural unemployment has fallen currently, not just because of Manrega take-up increasing, not just because migrant labor have gone back and therefore they are looking for Manrega work because there is practically no other work. The time at which migrant workers returned home was the time of the cutting of the harvest. And then came, the monsoon was around the corner, so it was the time of the sowing for the next season. So this is a relatively peak season in demand for agriculture, labor, and this is temporary. Within weeks, literally within weeks, this demand for labor, even in rural areas, is going to disappear. So are you going to depend upon only Manrega? What is going to happen is that you will see a sharp increase in CMI data showing unemployment in rural itself. And don't forget that because millions of people have gone back to rural areas, the wage rates would have fallen. And please remember that between 2012 and 2018, real wages were already flat or they were falling in rural as well as urban areas, something that I've demonstrated using government data. So don't shoot the messenger. The data is government data. If that was what was happening until 2018-19, you can imagine what has happened to rural wages now and what the knock-on effect on wages will be in urban areas of that. I finished speaking about rural areas. Let me turn to the urban. When CMI says that the urban unemployment rate has fallen, let me put it in very desi Hindi. वो रेडी वाला और आयरन और प्रेस करने वाला सड़क पे वापस आ गया है. That is all that has happened. रेडी वाला अपना सब्जी बेच रहा है फिर से. वो लॉकडाउन में था. The mochi is back. The darzi is back on the street side. The barber on the street side is back. Is that a job? I mean, I think the fact that hundreds of thousands of jobs are being lost in the organized sector is only beginning to come out. So you ain't seen nothing yet. You ain't seen nothing yet. Why am I saying this? The government is telling us this. The government has told us that the economy will contract for the first time in 40 years in the history of this country. It will not just contract by a small amount. There are varying estimates now which go up to 12% contraction of the economy in the fiscal year 2021. You ain't seen nothing yet. This is not improving very much in fiscal year 22, let me assure you. Because when demand collapses, then firms close down. MSMEs already, the All India Manufacturers Association, you know, last time we were together, Faye, you brought Raghunathan, who had done the nationwide survey. The All India Manufacturers Association had told us that the MSMEs have already begun to close down, you know, 1/3. of their companies, of their firms were saying they were closing down. So there is what we don't have to look for growth rate. We have to look for, when is the 1920, the lowest in 15 years in any case of growth rate, when is the 1920 growth rate, level of GDP, level, not growth, level of GDP going to return? I don't believe that after falling and falling and falling over the next 1 or 2 years, it's going to return for another 3 or 4 years. So I repeat, you ain't seen nothing yet. Because in 2018-19 already, we were at a 45-year high of unemployment. Why? Thanks to the great management of the economy by the government. I've said my bit.
Okay, that's a depressing jumping off point, but let's jump off nevertheless. Let me bring in Manisha. Manisha, you've just written an article I noted on the media and the kind of job cuts we're witnessing in the media. Could you take us through how bad the situation is right now and how many journalists are out of work? How many people in the media are currently likely out of work?
So it's been really bad. But the thing is that we've been reporting on job losses since September 2019. So we knew from September 2019 that things are really going to get bad. And I remember, in fact, that in the run-up to Diwali, that's the time when you usually see a lot of advertisements. You have thick newspapers. And around that time itself, your newspapers were still thin. There weren't so many ads. And what happens, of course, is because by that time we'd known that there's a slowdown, growth slowing. So the first cut that companies usually make is advertising. And they cut advertising, it's bound to have a very direct impact on newspapers and television media, mainstream media, which is mainly dependent on advertisements. So we'd been seeing this trend since September 2019, sporadic job losses, a bureau shutting down, an edition shutting down, a team of features being laid out in a newspaper. And then cut to March, it just accelerated. So the layoffs that we would have seen probably spread out over 6 months happened in 1 month. Now there's something unique with media, I think, which you don't see in any other sector, and which makes our job very difficult at Newslaundry, is that unlike a Zomato or a Swiggy, which when there's a layoff, they put out a press release, they say that, okay, we're laying off 30% of our staff or X number of people, and many big corporations do that. Media organizations are notoriously opaque about the layoffs that happen in their companies. Every time we've tried to reach out to editors or publishers to give us a figure, just a figure, that is it 60, is it 100, is it 400, we've received no answers. There's really no, and it's not just for us as people reporting on the media, but even when you speak to journalists in newsrooms, for example, when we were reporting on layoffs in Hindustan Times, I think it happened towards the end of May, when we were speaking to journalists in the newsroom, they themselves didn't know how many people had been laid off, and they didn't know if they'd be next. So add to the whole sort of going through this depressing phase of job losses around you, you're also dealing with daily insecurities of going about your job and not knowing whether you're next, because there's simply no transparency or open communication between the owners, the editors, and people working. So I think that is something that really has really brought the morale down for journalists, because it kind of makes you also feel like you're not important enough to be informed or to be treated respectfully, in the sense that you at least deserve to be told that okay, these are the number of people being laid off, or that you have 1 month and we're going to be taking these layoffs in the next few months. So lack of information, I think, also causes a sort of a despondency. So when it comes to how bad the situation is, it's really bad, because in the newspapers, we've had all big 4 newspapers. Indian Express took pay cuts, but there were also layoffs last week. Times of India, Hindustan Times, Hindu, all big 4 newspapers have had big pay cuts and job losses. Smaller newspapers, of course, like Sakal Times, completely shut. That was about 60 people losing their jobs. So it's pretty terrible, but because of the opacity of it all, it's really tough to say how many people exactly, and that makes it all the more scary. because you're operating in this space where there's no clear understanding of whether you're next or how big this problem is going to be.
And I'll come back, Manisha, to where the jobs may be, even if there's some of them. But I do want to talk about the IT sector. Ajit Kumar says, why is no one talking about the IT sector where the layoffs are happening in large scale? Let's bring in the guests who can talk about that. Rituparna, if I may start with you. What does the IT sector look like right now? Or, are they seeing massive layoffs? What have you noted?
I think, again, thanks so much. Good to be back. I think, Faye, I honestly don't see while there has been, like every industry got impacted, I think even IT sector have got impacted. And more so, I feel IT sector has made use of this COVID opportunity to clean off or reduce some of the staff that they would have reduced in any case. This was a great time, honestly. But otherwise, like I have maintained in all my conversations with you, I think IT sector will be one of the beneficiaries of COVID. While you might see some kind of layoffs happening in that sector, I don't think it has been in very large numbers, while it has been. But it's not been in very large numbers compared to many of the other sectors around us. And I believe that in the next 6 months, there will be an uptake because new job roles are likely to get created, whether it's in product companies, services companies, digital companies, when it comes to technology, because there is a clear shift towards a much faster digital adoption across all businesses. There is a clear focus towards making things which earlier we were thinking were just seen or heard in movies and futuristic stories. Cybersecurity becomes important. You see much more drone technology being worked on. You will see contactless payment becoming a way of life. You will see a lot of automated environments being created, and it will be necessitated because of the COVID nature of the pandemic, because we have to be socially distant, we have to make things touchless. I think all of them have ingredients on how opportunities can get created in technology. So yes, you might see some amount of shake-offs, some amount of layoffs, but I don't think they're very large volumes. I know a person who gets affected, for him it's 100%, but I think in general I feel that it's still much less affected compared to some of the other sectors, and it's a matter of time that the sector will rebound. I know one has to be patient and gritty, maybe utilize the time to reskill themselves in some of the newer technologies that are expected to come up.
Right, I will come back to you, Rituparna, to ask you, when you say that the sector will rebound, is it likely going to rebound in a fashion that will employ the middle management people who have been laid off, or is it likely going to rebound in a fashion that employs younger people at far lower cost? But Aditya Mishra is also with us. Aditya, Narayan, Mishra, which sectors have you seen take a hit in terms of job loss? And are you seeing green shoots come out in any other sector that we can focus on instead?
Yeah, I think the usual ones that you talked about initially, which is the travel, the tourism, the hospitality, that has been completely out of it. Has been a huge job loss there. The manufacturing sector is now slowly coming back to production, but we don't see recruitment yet, the fresh recruitment happening there yet, but they're just kind of trying to get their act together at this point of time. Then talking about consumer, retail is still heavily hit, so we don't see recruiting happening there. The action possibly is happening, we are seeing in the digital economy companies. For example, the the agriculture technology, or let us say financial technology. Ritu just talked about the contactless payments. There are several other MSME lending platforms, and all of that is coming there. So in financial technology, we see some action there. In agriculture technology, we see some action. Basically, every sector, education technology, we are seeing some action. There is movement of content writing jobs in the corporates for the digital marketing piece. Some of that is happening. Otherwise, yeah, most of the sectors are muted. We see that the the recruiting in the permanent payrolls of companies is still down by about 50% of what we were seeing in the pre-COVID situation. It is still
yes, taking all of this back to Professor Mehrotra. Professor Mehrotra, one question that keeps popping up every time: young people who are graduating at this point, what should they do? Is there, I mean, if we consider that they're going to be competing with people who have 5 years experience, 10 years experience, it's tough. Is there room right now for the fresh graduates or postgraduates to find jobs in this year?
I think your panelists so far have actually hinted at which sectors might actually see some degree of recruitment. I'll come back to that in a minute, but let me say that my suspicion is that there will be an increase in recruitment in the health sector. I'm hoping that the government will wake up to smell the coffee and actually increase investments in the public health system. In which case, it's perfectly possible that, because health services are a highly labor-intensive activity, one is hopeful. Let me assure you that I am again repeating that one can only be hopeful. There is not even a faint hint of a hope, of a faint hint of any actual evidence of what I'm saying, that this is going to happen. Because the government has not put in a fiscal stimulus. One was hoping that one of the items in the fiscal stimulus would have been to increase expenditure on public health. Why do you think Kerala has been so successful in actually containing the pandemic and so quickly? It's regarded globally as a star performer. Why? Because it has a public health system. And none of the other states have a comparable public health system. But let me raise a question even about digital adoption spreading. I buy what Rituparna is saying, but I have a question to Rituparna, which is the following: that what about global demand for our IT services? Isn't that going to fall because the European economy will collapse, the Australian, the Japanese economies will collapse, and not the North American economy is already collapsing. And unemployment is going to grow there as well. So overall, when demand collapses, even if digital adoption was increasing globally, wouldn't the overall demand collapse actually lead to an offsetting of this?
Also, Professor, forgive me, would there also be a situation where these countries, Europe and America and other countries, will start to look inward and start to keep jobs at home because they're going to have to accommodate their own population first?
Absolutely. Every country in the world is going to turn more protectionist. There's no question about it. I mean, we might be in a specific situation between India and China, so we might turn more protectionist. In a not very wise way, but the point is that you are absolutely spot on that there are many reasons why I'm saying that you ain't seen nothing yet, because what is now going to happen as we move forward is that defaults by corporates on their bank loans are going to increase. The defaults of MSMEs on their bank loans are going to increase. What is going to be the effect of that on the banking system, which was already creaking and crumbling? Okay, so NPA as a proportion of their advances had fallen from 11.5% to 9.5% in the last 4 or 5 years. We're going to go back up again. In other words, there's hardly any new investment going to happen. So why would investment happen? I mean, what was this 20 lakh crore package? The 20 lakh crore package is 90% in the form of liquidity for banks. if someone was willing to borrow. If no one is willing to borrow because there is no demand, because job losses are happening and wages are falling. So you needed to put a fiscal stimulus in place, and you're still not talking about a fiscal stimulus.
Yes. And that's something we'll come back to, but I do understand that Manisha has to leave in a few minutes. Manisha, a lot of my audience is waving out and saying hi to you, and they're happy to see you on this panel. But going back to the question that I left you with, in the previous round, where are the jobs in media right now for out of work journalists, writers, editors? Where can they go? Is there any movement anywhere else?
Wow. So there do seem to be some job openings in smaller organizations, digital organizations, but it's not going to be enough to accommodate the sheer number of people who've been laid off. But I think at an individual level, if you're a journalist that can multitask, there will be space for you in a newsroom. If not today, then maybe in the next 6 months. And when I say multitask, I think that you can no longer just be a reporter or just be a desk person. You need to equip yourself with a lot of other skills. So, be ahead of the curve, learn audio, learn podcasting, learn video. We know that a lot of people lost jobs because they couldn't adapt to, because the camera person was essentially in television, was replaced by a reporter with a selfie stick and a camera. So some of these things are inevitable. So equip yourself with the latest in technology and think ahead. So I'd really urge everyone who's lost jobs, or even young people who graduated from journalism schools who want to enter journalism, skill yourself in multiple formats, because you will be very useful if you have those skills in a newsroom when the glut is over, and it will be over at some point. Second, I think this is at the individual level. And one more thing I want to add was, don't be disdainful towards social media. I think a lot of journalists sort of sneer at social media, so that, we just do our work, we don't need to promote ourselves. So they look down at journalists who may be promoting themselves on social media. I'm not saying that you should let it overcome you, or it should become your primary identity, or it should become an obsession, but learn to market your stories on social media. It's a great opportunity. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram also, WhatsApp. These are great places to allow your work to reach out to other people. You no longer need to fight for that front page space, because you can actually reach out to more people through these social media platforms. So don't look down at it. Learn to market at an individual level using social media platforms. And so, this was at the individual level. And just at the broader level, I just wanted to touch on something, Faye, that as an industry, our near total dependence on advertisements is going to be the death of us. So there are two ways in which we get advertisements: corporations and governments. Corporations are going to not advertise the way they used to till economy revives, until growth is back on track. Till then, we're going to have to depend on government ads. And if you have to depend on government ads, you have to toe their line. And that's pretty much saying goodbye to a lot of independent good journalism. So as a media industry, we really need to think of other ways of sustaining ourselves through subscriptions, through rebuilding our relationship with our audiences, with our news consumers, and to make people understand that news costs money and you need to start paying for it, because other than that, if this ad model continues, it's really, I really don't see much hope.
Well, that's been my stand as well. And so one of the reasons why I left television and why I'm on YouTube is because I'm able to be honest on YouTube, because there's no handout from the government. Let's be completely plain about that. There's also a super chat option on this guys. You can actually support independent journalists that you trust.
If you like what she's doing, and if you like the journalism that's being put out, so support it, because it really does, like, journalism really does need news readers, news consumers to support and put their money.
Yes, that's how we will pay salaries, and if we can pay salaries, can we offer jobs to other journalists. Thanks, Manisha. I know you have to run.
Thank you. Thank you. Chatting with you. Bye.
Yes. Let me take this back to the rest of the panel, and I want to move through sectors a little faster here. Let's talk about hospitality. Hospitality, tourism, all of these sectors, people who work in restaurants, chefs. What should they do right now? Because it's very likely that these organizations, or these companies that have not worked for 2, 3, 4 months might not open at all. Are there any other options? Aditya, Mishra, are there any other options for these people? Can they do something to reskill themselves, make themselves more relevant? Do you expect home delivery to pick up? What is your understanding right
I think at this point of time, the way things look, uh, they have to find opportunities in other sectors. For example, somebody who was in the front office skill in a hotel has to look at maybe customer service for a digital company. Uh, I mean, that's the kind of best near job that you could look at in another sector. Somebody who was, in a sales job in a hospitality sector can try sales in another sector. So those kind of opportunities one would do, but will this really accommodate all the people who worked in the hospitality sector? I do not think so. There are not enough opportunities in the other sectors. But the best option at this point of time is to look for opportunities in the allied sector, in the, call it a neighboring sector where your skill is transferable. That's what one can do. And particularly for the freshers who are just passing out of colleges, for them it is definitely a tough time. So they need to really look at what else they can do. Of course, they trained themselves for a particular sector, but if that sector is not doing well at this point of time, and in the near future, it doesn't seem to really take off, where recruitment is going to happen and new jobs are going to get created. So
now?
they have to really look at possibly entrepreneurship opportunities. There will be a lot of underemployment for sure, but something one has to do. One cannot really lose hope. I mean, if we really look at history and what had happened to Europe after the World War, or all of this, Japan after the World War and all that. So countries have recovered, economies have recovered. I don't mean to sound philosophical, but just that there is history. It is going to be painful for all of us, and particularly for the people who are just passing out. I mean, this is their misfortune. We just have to be hopeful of the future. It will happen, but when is the question? Nobody knows the future. We can just keep trying in different opportunities that are
Yes.
possible.
So for people who are passing, who are graduating from college right now, this is what is known as a character building experience. This is going to actually change the way you approach jobs completely. Professor Mehrotra, 8 core sector industries contracted 23.4% in the month of May. This accounts for 40% of our total industrial production. And so the core sectors of coal, cement, steel, natural gas, refinery, crude oil experienced substantial loss of production. The Commerce Ministry has said this is because of the lockdown. Let's assume lockdown opens up tomorrow, a month from now. What sort of bounce back will we see? Because this is the sector that employs engineers, that employs project managers, that employs people who work in infrastructure. What is your forecast for manufacturing, core sector manufacturing?
Given the nature of the policy vacuum that we have seen in the last few years and even in the last 3 months in respect of manufacturing, I'm not hopeful. That doesn't mean that there are many things that cannot be done, which I will speak about in a minute. But let me just make a couple of points about sectors which have been spoken about before I return to manufacturing, if I may, Faye.
Please.
So media. One thing I wanted to say was that I wanted to say it particularly while Manisha was around. You know, journalists losing jobs is bad, but we already have a fairly spineless media. And when hundreds of thousands of media people are losing jobs, they are more likely to become more spineless. They are more easily going to bend. So I think they need to think about that. Secondly, Faye, my suspicion is that those who are leaving, who are being thrown out of media houses, they might end up doing what Faye you are doing. You might get much more competition in this space, which of course might be a good thing, but you're a senior and you are doing very well. So it's a bit unlikely that many people will be able to compete with you. But the point is that there will be There'll be entrepreneurs in this space as well. Let me turn to the issue of education and skilling, which of course all of us have been talking about for a while. There'll be a growth in demand because young people are being thrown out of jobs. There are young people who are just graduating, and they will have to bide their time and they will have to improve their skills. So in other words, what young people were already doing of staying on in education because there weren't jobs growing is going to deepen. In a situation of this kind, when more and more young people are looking for more, skilling themselves more, getting themselves more educated, what I fear is going to happen is that fly-by-night operators will even mushroom, who will offer themselves for that we are offering this course and that course. We have enough scandal in our skill development ecosystem. One day you should do a program upon that, because that's an area which honestly has not seen, has seen a lot of talk, but very poor, quality outcome and very poor employability. Something that, Manish Sabarwal and Rituparna always talk about. But let me come back to your manufacturing question. Look, there's going to be huge pain. However, there's some hope that might emerge as a result of the India-China standoff. That suddenly the government will wake up and actually adopt a manufacturing strategy, which it doesn't have. And please don't tell me if Make in India is a manufacturing strategy, because it isn't. Because if it had been, you would have seen an increase in manufacturing jobs until between 2012 and 2019. And what you saw was a decline in absolute terms, decline within the first time in the history of India in manufacturing jobs. So please don't tell me that Make in India is a manufacturing strategy. If Make in India was a manufacturing strategy, at Diwali we will still not be worshipping Ganesh ji and Lakshmi ji brought from China. So let's first recognize the facts that we desperately need a manufacturing strategy in the first place. Labor intensive manufacturing are sectors which, what do I mean by that? I'll speak about that in a minute. Labor intensive sectors which saw a decline in jobs in the last 6 or 7 years need packages. You need separate sectoral packages for food processing, for leather and footwear, for textiles, for garments, for wood and furniture. These are 5 sectors which are labor-intensive manufacturing sectors. Core manufacturing, the 8 sectors which are, in normal parlance, financial news parlance, the 8 core sectors are going to slow down. They are not going to see much job growth, for the obvious reason that the economy will be in contraction mode over the next 2 years.
Yes.
So let us at least try and make sure that labor intensive manufacturing sectors, which don't necessarily need so much money, they need policy reform. So the government can do that.
Well, that would be then for the engineers, for the project managers, for those working in the core sector.
Not necessarily. No, not necessarily, because there are a lot of service sector jobs which are spin-offs from manufacturing. Most people don't understand this. That's not true, what you just said. That, you see, let's just state what should be obvious. That we have been a services driven economy, and modern services sector jobs have certainly been growing, but services in the last analysis service production of goods and their distribution of goods. So if the agricultural production is not growing, if manufacturing is not growing, if construction activity is not growing, services is not going to sustain job growth.
Okay,
It
Ritu?
would just be
Yes.
Sorry, just a small point on this.
Yes.
This services, particularly on the IT, there were some discussions we had. Just one perspective on that. What we see is some of the, let's say a bank or one of those traditional industry, they are kind of revamping some of the legacy systems by deploying technology to reduce their, maybe reduce employment as well, but it's an, for example, a 30-member call center is being replaced by one bot. Okay, so there are maybe 3-4 jobs created to create that bot, but 30 jobs are lost. So there is an automation drive which is happening in different places that's unfortunately impacting those sectors, but positively impact the IT side of it. So some of the newer technologies that people are possibly those hiring is happening in the formal sector is in these kind of stuff that, drone technology, robotics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, some of these new things which will improve the efficiency of the companies. So we could expect that the Europe and the US and Japan and some of those countries possibly would further deploy more automation of these kinds, and some of that work is likely to come to the Indian IT services sector, which is not dependent directly so much. The export IT part of it is not dependent so much on our Indian core industry sector. So that's the only additional
So,
perspective that I wanted to
Aditya,
share.
effectively, you are saying that India becomes even more of a place where the Europeans and North Americans do body shopping, low-end software work, which we have done for 2 decades, and pretend that we've become a software superpower in the world. We become even more entrenched in that activity.
So actually,
No, no,
that actually brings me
actually,
to one second.
yeah, yeah.
That brings me to the question that I asked, Rituparna before we in the last round. See, the IT sector when we started 15, nearly 20 years ago, there were people who joined that sector who are now middle or upper management in these organizations, who are, by the yardstick of what you described, expensive. They're not coding anymore. They're managing the benches, they're managing the staffing. These are the people who are likely or have been laid off in the last year or so. In this new world that you're describing, will they find jobs? Or is it likely these companies will go out and get younger coders, younger people to design the kind of software that you're talking about?
Yeah, naturally, it's going to be a lot of younger people who are going to come in. It's not the middle management people who have been now the people managers have come into a certain kind of a cost bracket, maybe due to automation inside the IT sector. The pyramid, the organizational pyramid is looking very different right now. So, possibly those 2 to 5 years experience people are more in demand than the 8 to 15 years experience people.
Rituparna, is that the case in the sectors that you're looking at? Also, I have two questions for you. One about what happens to the legal sector. Lots of young lawyers apparently not being paid, clients are dropping them. And what happens to events and people in event management?
I think I have so many points now to respond based on the conversation that have happened. I will now take bear with me. I have this favorite Oscar Wilde quote that all of us are in the gutter, some of us are looking up. We are in a situation where I think it's important to make peace with the current situation. We can't go on complaining about it. Critiquing it any further is not going to help us look for solutions, because it is what it is. And I think we have to look forward and we have to look ahead. On the point of the technology, I think across the world, there is an acknowledgement that the future is, technology is no more an industry. Technology now is the basic operating system for any sector to thrive and grow. And we must acknowledge the fact that one thing we have done well in this country is that we've been able to create the talent pool which the entire world actually envies today. And it's not just in terms of quality, it's also in terms of quantity. And I actually don't look at India. I mean, India's cost of living is what it is. India's wage structure is what it is. But in spite of that, I think those in the technology sector have been huge beneficiaries of this move towards looking at India as a source of talent, as a place where good work can be done. I don't think that's unlikely to change. India is a young country, is expected to remain young in the years to come. And I think there are enough success stories coming out of India and in the technology sector for me to believe that youth will continue to look at technology as an important segment. Also, because of, for example, the H-1B visa, Trump has come out with an announcement which is quite, I know it's painful, it's shocking for many people, but we're already seeing green shoots where businesses are again looking at bag and baggage, making India the R&D center and the hub of all their work. They're saying, okay, we can't hire in US Indians, or we can't get these people in. But we can definitely ship our work and get the work done, because I don't think the world feels assured as much as they feel assured by the kind of work that we can possibly get done. And hence, yes, it is a difficult time right now, but I think I'm a firm believer that it's a matter of time that we will gain from it. And I think also I have to make a point, because I'm assuming that the people that we are talking to in today's shows are looking at what can they do now, how they can find jobs. Yes. I know that there are not enough jobs. And I have to make a point that, yes, we are talking about sectoral divides, that some sectors are doing well, some sectors are not doing well. But I'm urging all of you to not, yes, there is a chance of certain sector doing worse off than another. But I think the way you should go ahead and make your choices about organizations, if you're still looking for options, should not be based on big or small. I think it's very important, in my point, that please now evaluate the organizations that you're looking for to work across 5 parameters. Please judge their cash flow situations. Organizations who are huge cash burners today will stand exposed. Please look at their net debt situation. So companies that have borrowed money relative to their earning are going to be worse affected. Cost structures, organizations which have high fixed cost structures will be exposed. People-intensive business, I mean, what we are seeing today is an anthropological cataclysm, and people-dependent businesses will be hurt. Discretionary businesses or products. While, in essential services like healthcare, banking, telecom, power, I think there is less exposure, but things like places like hospitality, tourism, aviation, F&B, media, I think things are challenging. But even in this segment, you will notice that some organization will survive this and some organization won't be able to survive. So my request to all of you is that please do not succumb to this situation. I think there is a way out. Yes, COVID has exposed our underlying conditions. Let's say the technology sector Faye just mentioned. Those in middle and senior level, in technology, levels do not matter. In technology world, skill set matters. And how much you've been able to keep yourself updated is what matters. And anyone who has not been constantly updating themselves, and that's what happened in the technology sector even 2 years back. The middle layer were made redundant primarily on account of the fact that they lost touch with coding. They lost touch with the evolution in the world of coding. Those who were working on Java technologies actually did not realize that when suddenly open source technologies came and completely turned around things for them. Right. I think that's what's essentially is what we should be looking and how we should be evaluating the future.
I quickly want to slip in a question about retail, non-essential retail. So people who are working in luxury, in fashion, in malls, this sort of thing, which is going to take a little longer to come back, and the entire event management sector. I mean, how much longer is it going to be before events come back? And yes, go ahead, Ritu, and anyone else in the panel who wants to jump in.
I think events definitely will have the longest recovery curve. I think if you look at every possible information and data, which whether the World Health Organization is coming out with or all our Indian experts are coming out with, that's unlikely to take off at least in the next, let's say 3-4 quarters, maybe longer for that matter. And hence my request to all these people would be, listen, I think there are few sectors, don't anymore don't get stuck or married to the role. You have to bring out the fungibility in your skill set. You have to see whether you're able to use some of your skill set. If in event management, your skill is organization, if you are creative, then please look at using those non-cognitive skills and see which are
Yes.
the areas where you can make use of them, and then make those shifts already. I don't think you should anymore count on when the sector is going to rebound. On legal services, yes, it's a now that given the current situation, it is a service-based kind of a activity. I'm actually encouraging, and I was hearing even a while back Manisha talking about the plight of media folks. As a matter of fact, one of the most sought after gig work actually is content writing. And there are plethora of online portals which are globally being accessed by people, where you can use that as a way by which you can, and even people in the legal services, I think, should be able to do that. So I think if
Okay.
you're not being able to offer your services as a lawyer, can you also offer your services as a consultant, as an advisory in an online capacity? I think you have to reinvent your roles and look at options.
So it's the same question to the other two panelists as well before we run out of time. What can we do right now? Does it make sense to sit down with a pen and paper and write down all one's skills? I can write, I can edit, I can do this, write it down, and then look at it objectively to say, where can these skills fit? Is there another sector that I can apply to? Is it also possible that at this point we should all be willing to take pay cuts, to take maybe different roles that aren't as cushy as the ones that we just came out of? Professor Mehrotra, does it make sense across sectors right now to just relook at who we are and where we can fit?
No, that would be a very useful way of self-evaluation. Honestly, I interview candidates all the time. I supervise students all the time, and I'm appalled by the quality of the higher education or school education, for that matter, that they've received. And they need to take notice of that themselves. They need to recognize that the majority of our university students don't have writing skills.
Absolutely, I completely
They have
agree.
appalling writing skills. They are so
totally
bad so go ahead and take a writing course. One, you have the majority of our university students have absolutely appalling communication skills. Absolutely appalling. I mean, I cannot put it more emphatically. You ask them to make a presentation, they're shivering and shuddering. They don't know how to structure their presentation. You know, get yourself a course and, you know, just making a presentation. Learn how to write a CV, for God's sake. Even write a CV. So it's a self-assessment that you have to undertake. There is just no getting away from that. This was a situation pre-pandemic. Suddenly the pandemic situation has made things even worse. So you better, you know, wake up yourself, students.
Yes.
Or about to graduate, and to smell the coffee.
Right. Unfortunately, I've run out of time. Like I told our audience, we have a conversation with Nirupama Rao, the former ambassador to China, that's scheduled for 9 o'clock. So stay and watch that on this channel. But just to put it in a nutshell, there's no way you can avoid it. To quote Professor Santosh Mehrotra, we ain't seen nothing yet. So we're going to have to hunker down at this point and just be prepared for what is coming. In the meantime, write down your skills, figure out which sectors are actually moving at this point, find out where you can fit yourself, do courses. If you're a creative person, look at the software that people are now using to design, to edit, to put things out. If you are in finance, figure out the new software that's coming in to automate things in finance. I would love a journalist who could also handle the finances of a small organization. So there's no reason why we can't pick up skills across the board and multitask as well. This might be a good time for entrepreneurship, but we know from a story that my colleague Amita has just done that funding might be very difficult to come by in the next year and a half. So you're just going to have to live hand to mouth if you are an entrepreneur for the next 1 year. So the going is tough, but if there's anything we learn in this country, it's how to bear out a storm and how to work really hard. So this might be the time to put into action all of those things our parents taught us in the 80s. I'm going to leave it here. Remember, come back every evening at 8 o'clock. We'll do conversations that are of use to you. Leave me notes as to what you'd like us to talk about. And thanks for watching.